Right, welcome back, welcome back. Well, we've been promoting it for the last hour, and of course they're here now, and of course our visitors from Barbados were here quite early. Wayne was making his way through the traffic. We're going to meet members of BYAP this morning, Lumumba Batson and of course Emmanuel Barilla, who are members of BYAP, and of course Wayne Chance is here to introduce our guests coming from Barbados. And very often we here in Trinidad don't think of Barbados as having the kinds of problems that we witness here in Trinidad. Barbados seen as just one of those picturesque fairy tale type islands here in the Caribbean. But there's a reality that I don't think many members of our public are quite cognizant of. And Lumumba, of course, Batson is on the left of me here, and we're going to meet him. Lumumba, good morning, sir.
Good morning.
And it's a pleasure to meet you. And of course, we've got Emmanuel Barilla. Emmanuel?
Hi, good morning.
Fantastic. Wayne, let's introduce these two extraordinary gentlemen and our visitors from one of our islands.
Pleasant good morning to you, Hansley, and the listeners. Well, Hansley, this is, as you rightfully introduced, their names coming out of Barbados. I got in contact with them via the former ambassador of the United States, Mrs. Burgess. She had introduced us to one Mr. Blackwood, who is a representative of the USAID and another representative of the federal government in the United States. And they wanted to look for an organization within the region that can assist with BYAP in their quest to improve the life of young people in Barbados, as well as they have had a personal prison experience and they were deported. But the bigger story is that it is what they are doing now in Barbados as where the youths and so forth.
This is somewhat similar to the work that Vision and Mission is doing here in Trinidad.
Correct.
All right, good. And we're going to hear about BYAP now, and of course they're going to bring their experience, and of course they're going to tell their life story first of all. And let me go to Lumumba. First of all, Lumumba, you are a deportee, am I correct, where that is concerned?
Yes, I am.
Now, first of all, just tell me a little bit about BYAP, the organization, what you're doing, and why there was a need for such an organization in Barbados. I'm sure you will agree that many people feel that Barbados is a fairy tale type country who don't encounter the kind of problems that we witness here in Trinidad. We have a murder day here in TNT, and we've very often seen that the picturesque nature of Barbados doesn't even lend itself to the kinds of crimes or even activities, or even that the youth there is in danger. But BYAP is going to tell us a very different story, I'm sure.
Sure. Upon my arrival back home, after being gone for almost 38 years, I saw the same kind of problems that I saw that existed in America. I started to see it in Barbados. So it was kind of shocking to me leaving an island that, as you said, the picturesque island known for people that's, hospitality and, so I'm like, well, something is going wrong here. And then we went into the schools and we saw that the schools almost is like the American schools. I mean, the same kind of disrespect you see that goes on in America with the teachers and the students. You saw, and that's something that I never, when I grew up in Barbados, I left there at a young age, I never saw teachers being disrespected. So we realized that there is a serious problem, and it doesn't make any sense to keep putting those problems or pushing them under the rug, because at some point the rug is going to get too high and the problems are going to be exposed.
Lumumba, what is causing this? What would have changed so much? We're also lamenting the same thing here in Trinidad. The society that I grew up in has certainly changed, but there must be a reason for this change. Something would have come in there would have created an infection.
Well, I think it's a myriad of reasons, but one of the main reasons, I believe, is the internet. What the children today are exposed to at a young age. We couldn't even dream of. So it's a different world. And I think that the society itself has to be able to adjust and understand that, back in the days, you could afford to tell a child, you when I speak, you listen and you don't say a word. But you can't say that to a child today, because they're exposed to so many other things that, they don't want to hear it. So you have to use a different approach. And that's what BYAP, the Barbados Youth Action Program, comes with, a different approach in using our life experience, not telling them you don't do this or you don't do that. But we say, well, listen, this is what happened to us. This is what we did. And what are the consequences? What's at stake? No matter what, the choice is yours. So we give them back the power. Right? We don't take the power from them. We give them back the power, and so that they'll be able to say, well, look, what he's saying, I'm doing, and he's saying that this is what happened to him, and most likely it would happen to me.
Let's talk a little bit about the government support. Obviously, the government is going to see the importance of an organization such as BYAP. Are you getting the kind of support that's necessary?
Well, I would say our support basically comes from the normal people in Barbados. People that have children, people that's going through problems with their children. I think in these, the economy and the shift in the economy, the priority for the government is not exactly focusing on the youths. Right, so
you understand they wanted to cut their funding of tertiary level education at the University of the West Indies. I understand that's a proposal now being put forward as well. So that's an indication that they're shifting priorities.
Yeah, and so this is where BYAP the Barbados Youth Action Program comes in, because we understand with that shift, it is going to, the crime rate and the abuse of women and the abuse of the elderly, is going to rise. So, Barbados Youth Action Program, along with Mr. Chance, which is our mission, we came together and we see what the problem is. So we said, well, look, it's better for us to come together and see where we could at least assist in helping that when the hammer strikes.
Now, I just want to bring Emmanuel into this, and Lumumba, I'm going to come back to you just to tell your side of the story. But Emmanuel, I'm going to hand you the microphone, but if you could tell me your side of the story, and of course, if you could add to what Lumumba had to say with respect to what is now occurring with the youth in Barbados. And I think he pinpointed one very critical thing that we're facing, I think, around the world, what we call the cultural imperialism, and also the kind of cultures that are now being beset because of the presence of the internet as well.
Yes, morning Trinidad. Just to springboard off what you were saying in terms of what you think is causing some of these problems. We're living in a world now where everything is being accelerated. I mean, people say now, I don't seem to have enough time in a day to get something done. Well, the day is still a day, it's still 24 hours, but there's just so much more information to process, so many more things to accomplish, that time seems to just be slipping away. As far as the young ones are concerned, like the mama mentioned, the media is a major player in what goes on. Most parents are caught up with the work. So between trying to keep the work going, trying to keep the food on the table and take care of the mortgage or the college tuition or whatever, a lot of children are actually suffering from neglect. I mean, they even have families who seem to have all the money in the world and they can buy their children almost anything. And yet still you find that even these children are still being exposed to some of the problems you may find in the city. And it's not because they don't have, it's just that they still suffer from neglect. And as simple as this might sound, a lot of the youth simply want love. And they're not getting that at home. So they go and they seek different sources, and sometimes that lead them in different directions. And it's not that Barbados is going through this or Trinidad is going through this, like you said. This is going on all over. Yeah. And the Caribbean, we have to start realizing that, well, this is our backyard. So we got to first address this here. You know, you got the same problems going on in St. Kitts, St. Lucia, St. Vincent. So the idea is to use, as a matter of fact, when you read the Bible, you read somebody else's experience with God, and this somehow gives a person strength. Well, our stories is like a testimony because we've been tested. So when we share our life experiences, it's almost like scripture. And if you can learn from what Mr. Batson has gone through, you can learn from what Mr. Chance has gone through, or myself, or anybody else for that matter, then we can start finding ways to help. Because there's not one answer. There's no one cure. So that is to have a more holistic approach as opposed to just trying to deal with the child, because the child is from a family that in some cases may be impoverished or not. So you deal with the children, you deal with the family, and you deal with the communities. And in essence, one child after another, we take by the communities.
You know, one of the things growing up as well, I grew up in the southern part of Trinidad. We had people, and I'm looking at your picture of Haile Selassie there. And the influence of the Rastafarian movement came to high prominence here in Trinidad, of course, coming from Jamaica. But at that time, when we listened to Robert Nesta Marley, or we were listening to Burning Spear, or any of the artists during that time, the lyrics were positive lyrics. The lyrics were directly out of the Bible, or a speech by Marcus Garvey, or Haile Selassie's UN speech, which I think is the war song. The song War was actually all of Haile Selassie's speech. This influenced your mind, but in a very, very positive way. Today, we are seeing the negative impacts of what we call divisive lyrics, lewd lyrics impacting on the young people, because they're bombarded by so many things that are influencing their minds in the negative way. When you listen to Marley, when I was a young student, and you listen to Marley, you would hear love. He speaks of love. He speaks of God. He speaks of things that are positive. He speaks about rising out of oppression and things like that. That has changed. That influence is no longer there. And I think that that may be a contributing factor also to the collapse that we're witnessing with our youth. I even blame it on the chutney music as well. Chutney music, which seems to be immersed in rum songs and drinking and a sort of a lewd kind of perspective. That's hurting our youth today. And much, and I think the influence is a negative one. I mean, you wanted that?
Yeah, let me say that a lot of times what we do is, and I think this is where we go wrong too, is that we look for Robert Nesta Marley, or we look for Peter Tosh or Burning Spear, when we don't realize that leadership quality is within each and every one of us. Right. And what happens is that when those people are no longer here, it creates a void. Right? And that is where anything else is liable to come in. But if we realize that you're a leader, I'm a leader, all of us here are leaders, it would make the job a bit more easier for us to do. Especially, you see, when it comes to children, I always tell people, youths don't really listen to you. They don't really listen. They watch. That's right. Which is totally different. You understand what I mean? And we think that because we get up there and we say a big speech or a good speech, or we say something to the youths, don't do this or don't do that, we think that we're making an impact. But the impact is really when those youths sit back and watch you. Because they're going to listen. But then they're going to come back and say, well, how you could tell me that to do this and do that when I seen you doing this before? Yeah. You see what I mean? So you can't tell me nothing. So exactly. So we have to lead more by example. We have to watch what we say around the youths. We have to realize that what we're seeing in the youths is something that we have created. They came into a world that we created, not they created. Yeah. So if they're coming into the world and the world in which we created, and we see how they're acting, then that is actually a reflection on ourselves. Yeah. And we have to do something about it, not just keep pointing at the youths and saying they're bad, they're criminals, they're this, but realize that that energy is coming from you. You see? And this is where, as I said, we take full responsibility, because when we was in prison, the prison life, you go through a period that you blame everybody for being in prison. You blame your woman, you blame your community, you blame being black, and then you reach a point where you run out of blame and you realize there's only one person left to be blamed, and that's yourself. That's me. Yeah. You see what I mean? And this is where now the change comes about, when you realize, no, it's not nobody doing anything to you, it's you doing it to yourself. Yeah. Right? And if we could take that example and use it every day and realize that, what are the consequences, what's at stake, no matter what, the choice is yours. That is an individual, that depends on a community, that is also a nation. Regardless of what, the choice is yours. It comes back to us. What's going on in Trinidad and the Caribbean is because of making wrong choices. Yeah. Not that we have criminal children. We don't have no criminal elements, really.
They're not born as a criminal.
They're not born as a criminal.
Yeah.
They make wrong choices. And if we could make that paradigm shift, and see it as wrong choices, not criminal behavior, I think we could get through to them a little bit more better.
Well, how important is the issue of mentorship? I think mentorship is also a critical thing. We all had our heroes growing up, and today I think that's something that's actually missing. How important is mentorship? Because I think, that when you look at what's happening to youth, they have very little or no one to look to. Where are heroes? As a matter of fact, we look to America for heroes when right here in the Caribbean we have great heroes. But how many of them know who they are? As a matter of fact, I was walking along the Harris Promenade in San Fernando, and there's a statue of Mahatma Gandhi and Marcus Garvey there, side by side. No, and the young people who are playing there just after school, I wonder how many of them actually take the time out to spend time to know who these men are and what they represented. There's even a bust of Rodney Wilkes, Trinidad and Tobago's first Olympic medalist. They don't stop by and try to understand who they were. In our days, we had a Hazley Crawford to look forward to because he won the gold when we were young men at that time. So we saw achievements. But the issue of mentorship, where does that lie? Because community leaders could never be mentors. Emmanuel.
Yeah, well, that goes back to what Lamont was saying. Light travels at 100 and I think it's 86,000 miles a second.
That's right.
You're seen before you're heard. I mean, people see you. The youths, they watch you. And as being mentors, it is like, if they're looking up to you, then you have a responsibility to reflect the kind of image you like your society to be. The people are the society. So when you see that the youth are straying away from what people consider the norms in society, is that not a reflection of the same society? So when we get involved in children at schools, for example, they come to us, they always find out, how comes y'all do this? How comes y'all do this? It's because we don't want them to go down the same road and discover what we discovered. There's an old African saying that Mama always used, and it says, if you want to find out what's up in the road up ahead, you answer one returning, as opposed to answer the person walking next to you.
That's right.
So that connection, you talked about the two statues, and believe it or not, maybe the adults are not taking the time to explain to the children who these two men are. Yeah. So they grew up seeing these two statues, and for them it's just two statues. Yeah. There's no connection between Mahatma Gandhi or Marcus Garvey as far as they're concerned. You put up a statue of SpongeBob, I bet they'll tell you who it is. So we don't have the parents now raising the children. Yeah. They're being raised by cartoon characters and the influences that come from these characters. And in most cases, most adults not even aware because they don't even watch the shows. Yeah. So the children are being taught, and they're being mentored now by Cartoon Network. Yeah. So we don't have that connection, and that connection is also severing and breaking down the family ties. If you break the family ties, you're breaking the community. You break the community, you're breaking the country, because it has to be that holistic approach. And we got to really get back to family as a unit, and we have to find a way to be mentors, parents. Your child should want to grow up to be just like you. That should be that kind of connection you have as a mother to daughter or a father to a son. They should want to be like you. And if you don't have that connection with your child, then that's the time you should take and start realizing that you're working and providing stuff, yeah, but you're losing your child in the process.
One of the other things that I've been witnessing is that within communities we have gambling dens being set up now, gambling organizations being set up. But there's also another point that is being made, Wayne, and this is something that we have not explored, and only now they're starting to put a label to it. They're saying that what we call the Black or African youth crisis that is now facing the youth. One of the things that I said was that how could we possibly say as a nation, or I hear Minister of National Security, remember Martin Joseph back in the PNM, when we see a young man shot and killed on the street, and he's bleeding there, his mother is grieving, Minister of National Security, Martin Joseph, said then, well, he was involved in gang activity. And my question was, so wait a minute. So because he's involved in a gang, the society is supposed to say that that's okay, he's dead? Does that make it okay? So therefore we say, good, he belongs to someone else. That's somebody's son. That's a citizen of Trinidad and Tobago. That's an able-bodied young man who could have made a contribution to the development of the nation. And we're facing that now. But now we've attached a label to it. what we call and I'm hearing everybody, it's a buzzword now in the newspapers, about what we call the black youth crisis or the African youth crisis. Now, by even sticking a label to it, I think there's something fundamentally wrong to that as well. Lumumba, any thoughts on it?
Yeah, well, I believe that the root of the problems that we're having is culture is intrinsically in a part of or not a part of. When you look at the Indian culture, that's what you say, Indian culture. But where is the black culture? Where is the African culture, right? And because of the youths not having an identity, right, it creates an identity crisis, right? So it is, I understand on one hand where you're coming from, but it needs to be addressed that when you look through the entire Caribbean, and not only the Caribbean, but if you go to America, you look in England, you go any place, you go on the internet, and you look at all the murders that's taking place in these areas, they are young black males, all under the age of 25. So it is a crisis. It's something going on, and it needs to be looked at and properly analyzed to see what is it that you if it's in Barbados, is in Trinidad, is in Guyana, or wherever it is. When you see the face of crime, they usually show you a young, even in America, they usually show you a young black male. On one hand, as I said, I understand where you're coming from, but it needs to, culture is something that we have to face it. We need to sit down and talk. It's not saying that because I'm saying that I'm an African, that I'm against Indians or I'm against whites. It's saying that, yes, I do come from, of course, I come from,
of your people.
Exactly, right? So I agree that these things now do need to come to the table.
I'm disturbed about several things with respect to it, and as a country we need to speak to it. First of all, if we are to look at history in itself, in its entire context, we can say that we're all Africans because this is the birthplace of mankind, right? So man migrated out of there and settled elsewhere, but was born there. As a race, they're considered to be the most talented people, endowed with a certain level of talents that many of the other races would sit down and envy at. Yet you see this disempowerment occurring. And the issue of identity is a critical thing. As a matter of fact, today with all this exposure, if we're to look back, if we're saying that there's a young black African crisis to the youth, there are so many extraordinary examples that are there. So it means that the information that is being embraced is the wrong information. Then where do we start filtering that information? How do we get the right information to them? Here you are coming from the oldest race on planet Earth, the most talented and one with extraordinary history, and yet you're in crisis. And this is something that baffles logic. Somewhere in between there seems to be a missing link to all of this. Emmanuel.
Well, that's a tough one. That's a tough one there. Yeah, I know the elder want to touch that, rightfully. There's this, let's put it this way. Perhaps less than half a decade, 60 years ago or so in North America, there's a group of folks who call themselves the KKK. And what they basically did, most of them, is they went around and they tortured and killed Africans or black people. Ideally, that kind of came to a halt, but today we have the same issue in that we now have KKK, meaning kids killing kids. And the crisis you're referring to is one where now it is related to the trauma of slavery. It's post-traumatic slave syndrome. And this is a study that needs to be looked at very, very, very seriously. No group of people ever really gets up and decide to create their own genocide. You said about information and knowing. A person can only do what they know. You can only do what they know. And as far as children getting killed in the street and then other people coming and seeing it, that creates a trauma in their minds as well. And then kids are seeing this every day, and in the environment, they become products of that environment to the point where they become numb And so stoic to even gunshots, where you go into some suburban neighborhood, you fire some gunshots, folks go crazy. Oh my gosh, what's going on? But in somewhere else, that's like a normal thing. And you become conditioned to the environment. And then it starts to repeat itself over and over and over and over. As far as getting the information to the youth or to families, ideally it's about choices again. Yeah. Choices again. The church has a role to play, a significant role to play. I mean, one of the most major organizations within the community is a church. There's probably one in almost every single community. You have to start looking out for each other. You have to start encouraging each other to be more positive. We got to find ways to get the information that we may know to the youth. School is another example. In Barbados, in February, there's a day that they set aside and they allow the students to wear their traditional African, or rather yet, your culture wear. Because we have children who are from Islamic background, Hindu background, and they go to schools, and they wear their cultural outfits. And you should see those children on that particular day. On our Facebook page, as a matter of fact, if you visited BYAP space Barbados Youth Action Program, there's tons of pictures on there. And you'll see they're the most beautiful, the most beautiful array. I mean, it's amazing. You have children in their African outfits. You have children from Islam background in their cultural outfits. And they reflect that within them because you're pushing this knowledge and force them in a sense to realize that, hey, you're not just here as a child being influenced by the media or what you see on television. You have a culture. And it's okay to represent your culture and accept who you are. Because the rest of it is self-hatred.
Are you familiar with the situation in East Port of Spain and what's happening in Laventil? And also we saw it happening here in the Beetham, where one young man, I think, was shot at by the police. He pulled a gun on a police officer. Police officer responded, shot at him, and then following that, the residents came out and started stoning the cars on the highway. They blocked the bus route and that sort of thing. Brings me to this issue. Leadership, people who call themselves leaders in these communities. I think one of the great things that we're witnessing is the kind of injustice that is being perpetrated on the youth by their own leaders or men who purport themselves as people who anoint themselves as the leader. And what is your own opinion on that? Wayne and I have discussed this over and over again, but what's your opinion about some of these people who call themselves leaders, who use these young men, who perpetrate an injustice of defabricating their minds?
I believe that you said it earlier about, I believe you were speaking about an officer or someone that had someone who was killed, and the cold approach, you know, well, he was a gang leader, right? So that's why that happened to him. I think when you talk about leadership, it transcends just the community. Leadership has to come also from the police, from the ministers and everything. So if no one is showing compassion, if our ministers aren't showing any compassion, if our police who are there to serve and protect us aren't showing any compassion, then why do we expect anyone from the community to show that compassion? Because as I said, we live by example, you know, so the compassion has to come from I mean, everyone across the board. So you know, there's a Laventil all over the Caribbean. Mm-hmm. Yeah, right. And you could go to, and when you look in these communities, you will see that the cause of the Laventils in Trinidad and Barbados and Jamaica and these places is poverty. Yeah. Mm-hmm. You know, and how can a society that say, I mean, the Caribbean is so wealthy. There should be no one in the Caribbean that is poor. I'm saying that, and I'm saying it again. There is no one in the community that's poor. So it's poverty of the mind that we are having. Right? So these are things that we have to address and stop pointing fingers at, say, well, what about that leader down in that place? He's supposed to know better. No, you're supposed to know better. The society's supposed to know better. And so this is why the finger pointing has to stop, and we have to sit down as mature people and say, well, listen, there's a problem here. If it's a Laventil and there's a problem, what can we do? How can we put the resources? Because I'm quite sure there's so much talent in these places. There's so much creativity in these places, and all it needs is money. That's right. You see what I mean? So let's deal with the real issues. I'm not attack just one person, or we're not attacking the police. We're not attacking the people in the communities. We're not attacking. We are saying it is a concerted effort that everyone has.
It's the entire country's problem.
Exactly.
It's the entire country's. Emmanuel, I'm going to take your closing statement. Lumumba, I'm going to take that as yours.
Yes, yes. There's a song, man. It says, you know, ghetto you, zinc and board, pockets empty, guns them load. The idea is that is their reality. Whether you like Laventille or respect what they do or don't do, that's what they live every single day. And if it takes for them to gravitate towards certain behaviors to make sure that they have food on the table, like Lumumba said, if we give them an option, we can't just go there and say, you know, well, stop doing this, stop doing that, and that's it. Then what? You know, people are hungry, man. People are hungry. Families want food, man. And there's an old saying, if hungry man is an angry man. And the fact is, they say when the poor have nothing left to take, then they take from those who have. You know, so I'm going to leave you with that one, man.
Wayne, this is certainly, well, you got a microphone, so I'll hold on to this. This is certainly an extraordinary experience for us, and meeting BYAP this morning, and they're coming to bring their side of their story. And I didn't want to delve into the lives of individuals. I think that we've gone past that, and the past crime. We're way beyond that. Now we need to tell the positive story, why they're here and who they're going to reach out to. Where do Lumumba and, of course, Emmanuel go after this? And what is BYAP going to be doing here in TNT?
BYAP is here to look at the model of vision and mission.
Right.
Because they are being supported by various agencies and government officials in Barbados. Through USAID again, they are in Trinidad to adopt certain methodologies of vision and mission to assist in their food runs as an organization. So,
Go ahead, yeah.
so they are in Trinidad for the next couple of days until Sunday, and they are going to be spending a lot of time with Vision and Mission, as well as tomorrow, please the Lord, at Cascadia Hotel. There's a symposium looking at the whole question of deportees in Trinidad and the impact. And they are also going to be making a contribution where that is concerned. So people are invited. It's an open forum. It has been led by the Minister of the People and Social Development, Glenn Rabada, saying because we understand the impact of deportees to the region. And therefore hearing perspective from different Caribbean countries will add to the kind of report that will be put together to formulate a policy, a way forward, so we can implement solutions and answers to the kind of crisis that we are facing in Trinidad and Tobago. And they are here to contribute to that. But more importantly, they are here looking at the model of vision and mission, because we have seen them in action. We visited Barbados and we have seen them in action, and they do have a great level of influence in Barbados, and they can definitely add to the decrease in crime and delinquency in Barbados. So we are pleased, and we thank the U.S. government, and it goes to show when persons may look at them, because you know the whole question of Rastafarian and people preconceived notions, etc. But it goes to show the kind of support that behind these men in their homeland, as well as the country that they was deported, still supporting them and financing their trip, etc. It shows that what they are doing is positive, and people are rallying behind that because of the result they can achieve, etc.
Well, that's certainly great news. Interestingly enough, you would raise that point because my lead cameraman, is a Rastafarian and one of the best in Trinidad and Tobago. But you know, there's always the hope, and it's what we listen to. Interestingly enough, I could juxtapose a little example. I was listening to an album, and I was listening to the song Mash Them Dong, and I was listening to the anger behind the lyrics. And then, you know, on that same album comes a song with the most beautiful, it's a love song with the most beautiful lyrics you could ever hear, about a man lamenting the destruction of a relationship. Cry, cry, even tears, even my heart cries, but who cares? Whose fault? No one but myself. Who's that? Sizzler. Writing music like that. So it just goes to show that the glimmer of hope or the versatility and the capability is always there. We've just got to look for it. That's right.
Kingdom of Zion.
Zion, exactly. All right, gentlemen, I want to thank you very much, Lumumba, and of course, Emmanuel. Wayne, as always, it's a pleasure. I wish you all the best. Yep, and wish your minister the best. Glenn. Yeah. We need to get CARICOM going, however.
In Trinidad, man. All the Lavanteals and over, big up everyone.
Yeah, we got to big up everyone, Lavantil, wherever. We are one people, one Caribbean people. That's right.
Lavantil, by the way, is the place that invented the only instrument that was invented in the 20th century, which I think is the steel band.
That's steel band, of course.
And it was invented there. Yeah, that's the whole point. And today, it's a community that has a stigma attached to it. And you invented the only instrument invented in the 20th century. Folks, we're going to be right back. Our CPAP chairman is here. Yes, Mr. Adesh Dinarine is here, and we are coming back with Mr. Dinarine, and he's going to spend some time with us here on the show.